resume the recording. Yeah, so first I'm going to give a brief presentation and answer some of the most commonly asked questions that we get. And then we will switch into a Q&A, and we'll answer as many of the questions in the Slido as we can get to. So couple disclaimers first. This is we are not the admissions committee, and this is not the official stance of the admissions committee. We're going to do our best to help you out based on our personal experiences with applying to MIT physics and being in the physics department, but we cannot tell you or change who will be admitted. So what we're going to do today, I'm right now giving you the introductory presentation. Going to go over the application and frequently asked questions. I'm going to point you to some resources on the MIT Physics website that you'll hopefully find useful, and then briefly talk about the mentorship program that has applications that will open later today. Then we'll switch to the Slido Q&A, yeah. So the application is due December 15th. It includes an online component of the application where you put in sort of your biographical information. There is an application fee. I believe ours is still $75. For most schools, it's in the $75 to $100 range to apply to a graduate program. But especially at MIT, and I think at a lot of places, don't be afraid to ask for a fee waiver. We try to hand out fee waivers to as many people who demonstrate need and ask for them as we can. So please feel free to apply for those. There's information about that on our website. You'll need to supply transcripts. Unofficial transcripts are fine at this point. 3 letters of recommendation. I think you can still submit more than 3, but I think we sort of recommend 3. Some lists of research experiences and things like that. Your statement of purpose, and then an optional personal statement, and GRE scores are optional this year. So it's a very brief overview. A little bit more on fee waivers real quick. So if you've participated in one of the programs listed here, you're automatically eligible for a fee waiver. If you have not participated, but if you are in a member of some underrepresented or under-resourced group, you can request a fee waiver from OGE at the link there. And it's important to do that first. Then if OGE is not able to provide you a fee waiver, you can reach out to us at physics-grad@mit.edu to request a second review, and hopefully we will be able to supply you with a fee waiver if you need one. But if you think you are going to need a fee waiver, please get started on this early, because it takes some time to process this, and if you have not paid or received a fee waiver by December 15th, your application will not be reviewed. And I also believe it's the case that we cannot give you a fee waiver until you have started your application in the system. So it takes some time, so make sure you give yourself plenty of time for that if you are going to need a fee waiver. We also get a lot of questions about the sort of English language tests, the TOEFLs. We don't have a cutoff score, but students admitted to the program typically score above a 7 on the IELTS or a 200 on the TOEFL. But those are sort of those are flexible, and there's certainly ways where those are not hard and fast rules. You're required to take one of these tests if you're a country in which English is not the primary language, with exceptions if you have been in the US or in a country whose official language is English for 3 years or longer and will have received a degree from a college or university in a country where the language of education instruction is English. And there's more information on this on the FAQ on our admissions website. We also get a lot of questions about faculty sponsors. I think I've seen 1 or 2 of these in the Slido already. And the short answer is no, you do not need a faculty sponsor to apply. You do not need a member of the physics department to say, yes, I will sponsor their application in order to be considered. In fact, it is most common to not reach out to faculty until after you are admitted, although it's certainly not forbidden to reach out ahead of time, but it's absolutely not a requirement. All right, now I will point you to this URL, which has lots of great information about applying to the physics program. And if you've not checked it out already, I strongly encourage you to really look through it and take advantage of all the resources that we have put together over the last handful of years to assist in putting together a strong application. Yeah, there's a ton of great stuff on here, including frequently asked questions and answers to them, including the most frequently asked question, which is, of course, what is included in a strong application to the department. And as well as that, there's a bunch of these other questions. This one I think we will get to over the course of answering questions in the Slido, so I'm not going to talk about this one right now, but there's a bunch of other very frequently asked questions that have pretty simple answers. So I'm just going to go through these very quickly. Do you need to have a degree in physics in order to apply to the program? No, you do not. A closely related field or having sort of self-studied physics is certainly fine in a lot of cases. What are the requirements to complete the PhD? This is on the website. Check that out. Can I take schools at other courses at other schools nearby? Yes, you can. It's really easy to take courses at Harvard. How many years does it usually take to complete the PhD? 5 to 7 years. How will I pay? You do not need to pay. It is always fully funded. Your education will be funded by a TA, an RA, or a fellowship. So you do not need to pay to complete the PhD program. How many applications are submitted and accepted each year? These are rough numbers and maybe a year or two out of date, but roughly 1,600 applicants for 90 spots that are offered. Are there minimum grades and exam scores? The answer to that is no, there are not any minimums or cutoffs or anything like that. The application review is holistic. Moving over to the right side, the deadline is December 15th. Make sure you get your application in before December 15th. Otherwise, it will not be reviewed. There's some information about COVID-19 stuff on the FAQ that you can take a look at that is hopefully becoming somewhat less relevant, but the key takeaway there is that the physics GRE is optional. So you do not need to submit a physics GRE score to apply. Does the Department of Physics provide waivers for the English language exams? Yes, in certain cases, if you think this applies to you, you can check out the website for more details. Does the department provide fee waivers? Yes, I talked about that already, but make sure you get on that with plenty of time. Can I arrange a visit to the physics department or specific research area? This is not something we currently support on a large scale. Most people will visit the department after being admitted for our open house. Yes, all right, and then can I receive an update on the status of my application? No, there's no updates provided on the application from when it's submitted until when decisions are released. We just get way too many applications to be able to do that. You will be notified of a final decision before March 1st. And then the last question, can admitted students start in a term other than the next fall semester? Rarely, but it does very occasionally happen if there's a very specific reason for that. So those are some of the most frequently asked questions. Hopefully that gets a lot of the basics out of the way. Feel free to ask follow-ups on any of these if they're not clear. But if any of the Slido questions are sort of just restating one of these that have already been answered, we'll probably move past it pretty quickly. All right, we have done this for this is our third year now, at least, of doing this. So there's like there's at least 3 webinar recordings already on the website. So if you're looking for more information, the answers to more questions, you can go check that out. You can watch the full 6+ hours of webinars if you would like. Keep in mind that some of the information may be out of date, and especially related to like COVID. There's also transcripts of all of those recordings, and I believe there's a big document of from at least one of the years of like every question that was asked and its answer in like a Word doc format. So check that all out if you have more questions or you're looking for some specific answer that we don't get to. There's also going to be an email address that you can send questions to if we don't get to it during the webinar as well. All right, so then also there's a mentorship program that you may have heard about. We've gotten a few emails about this. After the webinar today, we will open applications for the PhysGAAP mentorship program. And this is the reason we do this way is that we hope that the webinar can answer a lot of the sort of one-off questions that we get. And the mentorship program is a good fit for you if you really feel like you need more in-depth guidance in preparing your application. So it may be a good fit for you if you feel like you lack resources to help you navigate the grad school application process, and you also find the other forms of assistance that we offer, like this webinar or emailing physics-grad@mit.edu, insufficient in answering your questions and helping you prepare a strong application, and you feel like you could benefit from one-on-one mentorship on your application. So later this afternoon, the link will be posted on the physics grad admissions page. So you can go check that out later today, or check back tomorrow. Certainly it'll be up. If you feel like you need that sort of one-on-one mentorship and you can't get your questions answered via this webinar or emailing us or other means. And I also had meant to put something, there's also going to be a sort of an office hours component to that. There'll be more information that on when the application goes up. Yeah. Okay. So now with that, we're going to move to the Q&A part of the webinar, which is going to be basically the next like hour and 40 minutes. So again, there's a QR code here for the Slido. I can send it again in the Zoom chat if that's easier for anyone. And you should also have it. Oh, have I been sending this to? I don't think I've been sending this so that everyone can see it. I'm sorry. Okay. Now there's the link in the Zoom chat. Anyway, yeah, check out the Slido. And submit questions there. That's where we will be answering them from. So the QR code here. If we don't address your questions, again, email physics-grad@mit.edu after the webinar. And panelists should all have their divisions displayed under their names. Hopefully I got everything right when I set those up. If not, I think panelists, you should be able to change it. Yeah, let's go around and do some introductions. And while we do that, I'm going to set up the screen share for the Slido. But first, I'm Kyle. I'm a 4th year PhD student in AMO. I actually mainly work out at Lincoln Laboratory in Lexington, doing trapped ion quantum information processing. And I am a member of PhysGAAP and help put this on. So I'm happy to answer questions about any of those sorts of things. Why don't we go to Ellie? Do you want to introduce yourself and then send it to somebody else?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Ellie. I'm a 4th year grad student in astrophysics. So my advisor is Jacqueline Hewitt, and work in radio cosmology on a telescope project called Hera. Okay, I'll pass it on to Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. I'm a fourth year grad student also in the astrophysics division. I work with Professor Erin Kara on supermassive black hole accretion, and I will pass it to Hao Chen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hao Chen. I'm a fifth-year graduate student in astrophysics. I work with Professor Kiyushi Masui on radio cosmology data analysis. I will pass it to Adita.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adita Bitucci. I'm a third-year graduate student in AMO, and I do experiments. I work with Vladan Vuletic, and our lab focuses on trapping neutral atoms and controlling them to get, for applications in quantum information. But in addition to that, we also work with optical cavities. So we have an opportunity to also study cavity quantum electrodynamics and see how cavities can help with quantum networking. Oh, and I'll pass it on to Swatha.
Hi, I'm Swadha. I'm a third-year student in AMO/Astro. I work at LIGO Instrumentation on precision measurement for gravitational wave detection and dark matter detection experiments using lasers and optical cavities. And I'm also currently a student member of the admissions committee. And I will pass it on to Sophia.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophia, a first-year grad student in Astro. I work with Professor Salvatore Vitale on data science for LIGO. And yeah, I'll pass it to Kaylin.
Hello, I am also a first-year Astro grad student working with Salvatore Vitale on gravitational wave astrophysics and data analysis. I will pass it to Jess.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a first-year graduate student in the condensed matter experiment division. I'm working with Professor Joe Chakowski on finding a potential skyrmion host material. And I will pass it to Megan.
I think I already went, but Josh, have you gone?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll go. So I'm Josh. I'm a second-year graduate student. I'm in NUPAC, so that's experimental nuclear and particle physics. I work with Janet Conrad on experimental neutrino physics. And I guess I'll popcorn over to Sydney.
Sydney Miller. And I'm the face behind physics-grad at mit.edu. So I'm the one who receives many of your inquiries. If you don't hear back from me within a few days, please resend your inquiry. There's a lot of email. And I manage the grad admissions process as well as working with current grad students. And let me see if there's anyone to popcorn to.
Did we miss anyone? Cool. I think we got everyone.
I think we did it. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess first I just want to thank everyone, all of the panelists and Sydney who have shown up here, and I want to highlight that this is all sort of volunteer stuff that we're doing to try and help out as you know, people applying to the admissions program and make it more equitable. So I really appreciate all the panelists who are here, and of course Sydney for all she does for helping out with our efforts on this, and it's awesome to have her here. And of course, thank you all to the attendees who have shown up. And yeah, we can start the let me make sure I start the right one. Hang on. Let's see. Okay, I believe we're looking at the right screen now. Cool. So Megan, you're good to run the Slido? All right, so we're going to go ahead and start answering questions. And yeah, again, panelists, please just raise your hand if you would like to respond to a particular question. So the first question that we have is, in your opinion, what do you value more in students' GPA or their research ability? Would anyone like to respond to this first question? Sure, Ellie.
Yeah, okay. I think I would say there's a lot of emphasis, like when you apply to grad school, a lot of advice online and people who talk to always emphasize like research experience and being able to talk about research. And so I would say that's true here as well. So I think in your statement of purpose, if I could branch out a little bit, it's sort of very important to sort of highlight how you would fit into research at MIT. And so I think because that's what you will be spending your PhD doing, so that is sort of why it's sort of heavily emphasized in the application process.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, if no one else wants to weigh in, maybe I'll just mention that, you know, of course, we do look at GPAs in the application review process, but I think it's definitely true that, yeah, demonstrating your, talking about your research experience is probably the more heavily weighted part of the admissions criteria. Great. Oh, Hao-Chen?
Yeah, I can also say a few words about this. So the admission process is holistic, which means all the factors could play an important role. And this really could depend on the institutions one went for the undergrad. If, for example, if you went to a very small college and there is not a lot of like research faculties around, in that case, you know, having a strong GPA and could really complement the fact that there was not a lot of research opportunities available. But if you went to a major research institute, and especially you did a lot of undergraduate research, then of course it's a great idea to emphasize that in your personal statement. So it really depends on your situation, and it's really a combination of these factors that will speak for your application.
Great, thank you. Cool, let's move to the next question. So how important is it to have publication, either for first author or co-author for the application? So maybe we could hear, especially from, I'm guessing there are panelists on here who did not have publications when they applied, because that is definitely, there are definitely plenty of people who did not do not have publications when they apply. Hao-Chen, do you want to respond to this one?
Yes, so I did not have a publication when I applied, but I was doing research with a research group, and I was in the process of writing a first author paper. So in my case, I mentioned that in my personal statement, and also the research advisor who I was studying with was one of my recommendation letter writer. So he also mentioned that I was writing the paper. So in my case, because I provided a lot of details in my own statement and a lot of details in the letter of recommendations, I think that was enough to convince admissions committees that I was working on a research project that could turn into a paper. So in other words, that it's really your experience matters, right? If you are in the process of writing a paper, make sure mention it somewhere. And the other thing is, I think this is almost a consensus, but if you have a paper, if it's on archive, but it has not been like officially published in a journal, then it's still good, right? So still feel free to mention that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Jess?
Yeah, I also did not have a paper when I was, by the time when I was applying. And I think there are many factors going into if you can submit a paper or have it published. So I think the more important part is to demonstrate that you have the potential and the ability to do research. And another thing to mention is that in terms of experiment, a lot of undergraduate research projects might focus on something that is more sort of like building like a transfer stage, for example, or like just experimental setup really like related. And those kind of things, you probably can't turn that into a paper. but it still demonstrates that you have the ability to do research. And I think those are just as important as having like a published paper.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Sydney, you want to say something, and then we'll move to the next question.
I just wanted to add that there's variability among research. So thank you, Jess. That was the point I was going to make. And also that there's an opportunity to update your application if you haven't yet heard back about a publication. So you can update that when a paper is published at a later, like in January.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Sydney. Cool. All right. So the next question, what do you think made you a strong candidate for MIT? I think obviously anyone can answer this, so maybe we'll take 2 or 3 responses for anyone who wants to weigh in. Anyone want to volunteer to go first? Ellie?
Yeah, I can go first. So I would say okay, I'm gonna like nitpick the wording of the question. I think less than being a strong candidate for MIT, you want to show that you're a strong candidate for your research interest, which should exist at MIT. In the sense, and I say this because when I applied for grad school, I was applying in like loosely the field of cosmology, but in a couple different subfields. And what I found was sort of like when you're writing your statement of objectives, you want to sort of, I think a good way to think about it as a personal exercise and also for your statement of objectives is to you want to show that you understand sort of like the big current research challenges in the field that you're applying to, and sort of show how your interest and experience lines up with it. So for my research field that I'm in now, which is 21 centimeter cosmology, I think I was very successful at getting into schools where I sort of said I wanted to work on that. And then in some other like more mature subfields of cosmology, like CMB experiment and stuff, I felt like I did not really get into a lot of programs to work in that field. And so I think sort of being able to demonstrate you understand the problems in like the research fields you want to work in, and that show like you have experience and interest would make your application strong for MIT and also any other school where you would want to work on a particular field.
Yeah, that's really important. And yeah, maybe I'll just chime in with my 2 cents, which is that I think the thing that I was most surprised about learning from the graduate admissions chair here, the faculty member who's responsible for the graduate admissions process, is that he suggested like at least half a page of your personal statement, like 25% or more of it should be devoted to how do you fit in specifically to research at MIT, which I feel like is not information that I really received when I was applying. So it is really important to show that you have thought about how you fit in here. Kaylin.
I think Ellie and Kyle said one of the main things I was going to say, which was talk about how what you've done can connect to the things that you're interested in the future, specifically at MIT. But then also thinking generally about structuring the application, something that I spent a lot of time like workshopping and iterating was being able to explain my research concisely and clearly, talking about exactly going from the big picture to exactly what I did and how that's going to farther that field. Even if I hadn't made a lot of progress on that particular research project, that I think that the ability to clearly explain how you have developed skills in your research or in your classes that will then apply to those things you're interested in at MIT is critical, because a lot of, I think sometimes an underemphasized part of undergrad is being able to, is science writing, and your application is not, strictly science writing. You're not trying to write a publication when you're applying to MIT, but working on describing your work and how you have made some sort of contribution or have demonstrated skills that can potentially make a contribution in the future is very useful.
Yeah, Awesome. And yeah, I think this is a pretty important question. So Josh, you want to weigh in real quick, and then we'll move to the next one.
Sure. I was just going to add that I want to emphasize the point that like your strength as an applicant to MIT is pretty individual and like unique to you. I think people are bringing a lot of things to the table when they're applying to MIT. Like for me, I didn't have any publications coming in. I had a couple of research experiences, but I had changed majors to physics sort of halfway through my college experience. So that was, not necessarily like I didn't have as strong research experiences as many other applicants, I'm sure. But I worked in industry for a year after undergrad, got a lot of technical skills that would make me a good fit for my PI's kind of group. And I think like I spent a lot of time working on communicating my story of I kind of left physics and I came back to it. And now I have these skills and, sort of emphasize that journey was really important to make me a strong researcher, specifically at MIT with Janet. So just keep in mind that I think different people's strengths are just as valid, and you should emphasize, what makes you as an individual a good fit for research at MIT.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everyone. I think with that, we can move on to the next question, which is, how can I increase my chances of being accepted given that I'm in a small university with minimal research opportunities, especially in high energy physics? So we've talked about this a little bit. I think Hao-Chen mentioned some about this, but yeah, Swada, you want to take a crack at it?
Yeah, sure. So I would say a few things. The first is there's two statements you submit to MIT when you apply. One is the statement of purpose, which is about your research, and one is the personal statement. And it's kind of interesting to see how many people don't use the personal statement fully. And I would say that, if you're in unique circumstances like these, then you should write about that in your personal statement. If you seeked out opportunities that were maybe hard to get, or you faced some kind of obstacles, you should write about that in the personal statement. So I think, and if you kind of did things to increase opportunities at your college or whatever, something for the community, you should also mention that in the personal statement, because admissions is a very holistic process. And I think maybe sometimes people think that the personal statement is not as important, but we do read it, and it's somewhere you can give more context for your application. And other things like, of course, any kind of research experience and high GPA, good grades in advanced physics courses, all of that, especially if you're in a college where there's not a lot of advanced physics courses that are offered, all of that is kind of read in the context of your application. So you should, that helps with the admissions process. And just for any application, if you, in your statement of purpose, you show that you have researched specifically about MIT, so you've shown that you've read about people at MIT, etc., does irrespective of where you're from, your research aligns to the professors at MIT, that also helps, irrespective of where you're applying from or whether you had a lot of opportunities or not. And finally, I want to reemphasize that it's a very holistic kind of process where we evaluate the applications. And I think that professors do give points for grit, or seeing that someone has made the most of the opportunities that they were given and stuff like that. So that's it's not a robot reading it, it's a person. So all of that is taken into account.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so the next question is, for the international students, do you find that there's at least some time during the year when you can visit your family, or is it not that realistic? Yeah, Adita.
So before I answer it, for me, I want to specify that this experience will vary a lot from group to group, depending on your advisor, depending on the group culture. So I can speak for myself. I do visit my family twice a year, usually in the winter and the summer break. But once you're done with classes, which should happen about the end of your second year, you can pretty much visit at any time because you're not really constrained by finals or the classes you're taking. You're not really missing much of the academic year. So then it's just you have the flexibility around how you plan your research and your trips. So I do take about 2 to 3 weeks each time. Usually I do 2 weeks, but sometimes if there's other things planned, I'll do 3 weeks and then I'll plan my research according to that. But I think it is pretty realistic, and I mean, other students can also speak to this. So I know a few other international students who kind of do this as well. So I'll just let someone else share their experience.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia.
Yeah, I guess, well, I'm very new here, but I see that people actually do take like their time during the winter break in the summer, especially like in their first year or in your first and second years when you're still taking classes, as Elita said. You still need to, well, be here for the term, but professors are usually like very flexible whenever you want to visit your family. This is not like a very strict full-time job in that sense, and you can get time whenever you want. And I, for instance, am planning to visit my family this winter break, although I'm still taking classes, because like there are no classes in that term. So yeah, it is pretty doable.
Awesome. And real quick, Hao-Chen.
Yes, so this also depends on which country you're from and how far it is. Well, for citizens from certain countries, it can take a long time to get a visa, and sometimes the visa expires only after 1 year or so. So in that case, it will be harder to visit your family, but still it's not impossible. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. All right, so the next question. How important is it to contact potential supervisors prior to applying? If they don't reply to an email, should we still mention them in our application? And I guess I want to head this off a little bit by reiterating that you are not required to reach out to supervisors ahead of time, and that you should still put them in your application. But yeah, do you want to give a more in-depth response?
Yeah, so I think for all of the schools that I applied to, I tried to contact about 3 to 5 professors that I was interested in. In some schools, maybe fewer if there were not as many faculty that I was interested in their research. I think no one at MIT responded to my emails, and of course this can come from various reasons. I mean, these are very busy people, and they might not even see your email, or there's a lot of students who are asking about this, or maybe at that time they're not thinking about admitting new students, and then by the time of the admission cycle they might be ready for it. So there's like a variety of reasons. I would say for the other schools it definitely helps to reach out and talk to the advisors beforehand, because I got to also meet some students in their group, talk about their research and the student environment before I even apply to these schools. So I think it helps in terms of just for you to get more information about the place. So you can also email graduate students to learn more about the group, but I don't think that it necessarily affects your admission. It might help if you have some kind of relationship with that potential supervisor, but not necessarily. And so even though I think the professor that I'm working with right now, I really emailed so many professors I don't fully remember, but I think I contacted him beforehand. And then I also put his name on the application, and I also put his name on my statement of purpose. So I think you should definitely, if you're interested in working with some professor, you should mention that in your statement.
Cool, thanks. And maybe Jess.
Yeah, so I think it sort of depends on like kind of like what you want, because I know people who got in without contacting professors, and I personally contacted a few, but I don't think it's critical. I do think that it is helpful to know if the professor is taking students this year, because in some cases, like some professors might not be taking students like during your application cycle, and if that is kind of like your sort of a go-to professor that you really, really want to work with, then maybe you can reconsider about like maybe like mentioning another professor instead, or like, yeah, basically just consider your options.
Yeah, and then maybe I'll weigh in and just say that I did not email anyone at MIT prior to applying, so that is also, you know, it is, reiterate that's not required. Sydney, and then I think we'll move on.
I just wanted to add that we don't have a formal way for the professors whom you've contacted to give us feedback on the admissions committee. It's perhaps more helpful, if possible, for you to describe why you would want to work with that particular professor and group. And then if there are other professors and groups you aren't aware of, maybe they're new, maybe there's a new grant, maybe there's a new area of research, they can extrapolate from what your research statement says. So it just helps us to sort of direct your application to people who may be interested.
Awesome, thanks. All right, do you have a percentage of how many US and international applicants you accept per year for PhD programs? I don't know if any of us would have that number. I don't, my understanding is that international students are not really considered separately from the US students during the admissions process. So it's not like there's a quota for US and international students at all. I don't know off the top of my head what the sort of ratio is. If anyone does, they're welcome to chime in, but otherwise, yeah, hopefully that helps answer at least partially your question. Okay. Oh, Sydney, sure.
Oh, I just wanted to add that, you know, the student body is approximately half and half, but we certainly don't have quotas or goals.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. What percentage of accepted applicants do not hold a master's degree? Again, I'm not sure we have, you know, numbers for you on this, but I think that it is sort of more common to not have a master's degree than to have a master's degree, because in the US, that's the norm, at least. There certainly are people here and on this call who have a master's degree, but it's absolutely not a requirement. If you have sort of the rough equivalent of the US 4-year undergrad degree, then that is absolutely adequate. Yeah, Sydney.
Sorry, I completely agree. I just wanted to add that there are some students from some programs who find that a master's degree gives them research opportunities they didn't have in their undergrad. That's not required in any way by our admissions process, but that can be a helpful path for applicants.
Cool, thanks. All right, so the next question, what is the proportion of scientific context you expect to see in the statement of purpose? Should we focus more on motivation, explaining our previous research, or other aspects? Swada.
I would say that explaining your research is very important. So it's not, so your statement of purpose should have scientific content, but not in the sense of you are over explaining the methods of your research, but in the sense of whatever project you explain, you should be able to explain the motivation and what you got from that project, maybe some result, but how that project connects to what you want to do at MIT. So more focused on that, because there's a lot of applications that will detail out what kind of code they used and what kind of, which is also good, but I would say more emphasis on the motivation and the connection to your future research is a good SOP. Because we also have a separate section for research experience details. And also it's very important to put in what you want to do at MIT in your SOP and how that is connected to your previous research. So scientific context in that sense is pretty important.
Yeah. I just want to chime in too and say that it's important to think about your audience. So your application is initially going to be read by the admissions chair, who is probably not in your subfield. And so you want to make sure that what you write is clear and understandable to people who are not in your subfield. And they will try to have it read by the people who you name in your application, but that's not a guarantee. So, even within the sort of division of physics that you're in, it may not be read by people who do exactly what you're interested in. So just make sure to that it's not so nitty-gritty that that's an issue. Sophia?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, my 2 cents here is that you should emphasize in your SOP how the research experience you have acquired, if you have research experience, has given you like skills, and how the research you've done has impacted a particular project you've been working on. So yeah, I feel like that's the most important thing, because with this SOP, you basically want to convince someone that they want to work with you. And like the best way you can do this is like showing that you have the skills and that you're going to have like a particular impact in a project that you'll be working on during your PhD.
Awesome, thank you. All right, the next question: how important is the physics GRE? And maybe I'll start by maybe answering a different question that I think I saw, which is sort of like, how optional is it? And I do have rough numbers on that, which I believe is that approximately 10% of applicants and of admitted students submitted the physics GRE. So it's a fairly small number, and it does not have an obvious sort of statistical advantage or disadvantage to submitting it. But that said, I think there are reasons why some people might find it useful to submit it, and hopefully we can hear about that. Swata?
Yeah, I would just want to add that the only instances where it's really helpful, and if you've taken it, it's not by any means necessary. That is very important to emphasize. But the only instances where I've seen it be helpful is if you had maybe lower grades before, and due to whatever circumstances, and you kind of want to show that your understanding in physics is still as clear, and you want to show that that's pretty strong. So that's one case. And another case is if you are maybe from a lesser known university that you're applying from, which again, by no means necessary, but that's one case in which it might be advantageous, is to show that your physics knowledge is just as good as if you were applying from a university where the statistics were more well known, but again, not necessary.
Yeah, thanks. Sydney?
I just want to emphasize that optional is truly optional. We are not judging whether or not you'd make the decision to include a physics GRE. The other group of students for whom it can be helpful is people who did not earn a physics undergrad degree. They maybe studied in another area and took several physics classes. Remember that the application is read holistically. So if for some reason you feel that the transcript you're providing doesn't fully demonstrate your background knowledge in physics, the GRE can help. The GRE can help to be weighed in a positive way for you.
Awesome, thanks. Moving on to the next question: can you get into a PhD program right after bachelor's? So we sort of already answered that. And is it fully funded? I answered in the FAQ, but I don't know if anyone wants to chime in on the funding situation. On maybe we can twist this question into sort of what how does being an RA TA / fellowship impact your time in the department? Because I'll just reiterate again, everything is funded. You do not have to pay, and you will be funded somehow. But yeah, Ellie.
Well, it's fully funded for your whole degree. And I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think now it's generally the case that first years don't have to TA either. So you don't have to do any grading or teaching. You would be funded either by a fellowship, or a specific professor would pay your stipend. But sort of in either case, you also don't have to teach your first year, and you're guaranteed to have income through your whole degree.
Thanks. Yeah, Sydney. You're muted.
All right. I also want to jump in to say that fully funded means different things at different programs, and I want to be very explicit that we truly mean fully funded. We're covering the tuition, the student health insurance, and the living stipend. I did see a question before about how the stipend, you know, if it's enough for students to live on, et cetera. I don't know if that's something students want to address, but we really do mean fully funded. Just so people are comparing apples and apples.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really important point. Cool. Well, maybe we'll move on for now, and I'm guessing we'll get questions about the funding. You mentioned that had been asked somewhere else, so we can answer that when it comes up. But yeah, for now, let's move on to, okay, if my paper gets published after the application deadline, can I update the application with this new information? Sydney, I think you already kind of mentioned yes, but you want to give maybe a little bit more detail of how the process works?
Sure. There's you can log back into your application to update things. And in fact, we want you to update with your fall term grades transcript when you receive it. So we expect that there will be some new materials that you provide probably late December, early January. And it's sort of a quirk of fate that many publications don't actually give people a response until that time, like early January. I know it depends on research area. I did actually want to just quickly address part of the question. The previous question was about coming here directly from bachelor's, and that is absolutely the path for most people, depending on what their background is.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. So I think that answers that one. How does the option that appears in the application form of current grad students also reading the application impact the application process? So I guess maybe for some context, I believe there is a checkbox that says, you know, yes, I would like current grad students to read my application, and Swada is one of those students. So yeah, maybe you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's your prerogative if you want it to be read by grad students or not. Statistically, I think 90% of students choose to have the grad students read it, but that doesn't, there's no judgment associated with that. The point of having students on the grad committee is to make sure that the admissions process is more holistic, less biased, but and they can kind of provide a different perspective than like just having grad students kind of expands the perspective of the admissions committee. So that could be some reason you might want for a grad student to be reading and advocating for your application, but it does not impact, like if you don't check that box, that's totally fine. That's your right.
And sort of to be clear, right, it's an additional reading of your application, right? It's still read by all the same other people. It's just also read by a grad student during the first round. That's how it works, right?
Not exactly. There's a few
Okay.
rounds of associated, and in the first round, there's the grad student reading happens only in the first round. So in the subsequent rounds, yes, your application will be read by other professors. Yes.
Okay. Cool. All right. Moving on to the next question. Do all of my recommenders have to be professors? I don't think there's any official requirement on who your recommenders have to be. I think that is up to you more or less, but maybe if anyone wants to talk about sort of why they chose their recommenders to be who they were, that could be helpful. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, so the advice that I got always about like who should be your recommenders are always like you choose people who know your work and know you best first. It doesn't really have to be a faculty. If you, for example, worked with a postdoc, most of the time you were doing research, then like say they like literally work with you every day and you only like report to the faculty who's in charge of the project, then it is probably better to have the postdoc write your letter because they will like full-heartedly know you better and thus write a better letter. I think another option that is often considered is you can talk to the faculty who may not know the work that you do that well to collaborate with the postdoc that you're working with, or like some other like research scientist or whatever, and the two of them can like discuss and write a stronger letter for you. But this is totally like your personal choice, like you, but the bottom line is to have someone who know you well to write your letters.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess I'll just add that I know also some people, like if they do an internship at a company, but they're doing, you know, research, it's sort of a research company type thing. They might have their supervisor there write a letter of recommendation, even though maybe they're not officially a professor, or like at a national lab or something, right? Those people aren't professors, but they're research supervisors. So cool. We can move on to the next question then. Oh, and I also just want to say, I know a lot of our panelists have to go at 11, and we have a few new panelists joining. So thank you all to any of the first half panelists, and of course you're welcome to leave as you need to. And I can't see everybody, but thank you to the second half panelists who are joining us. Yeah. All right. So the next question is. What is the research environment like among graduate students? Are your peers supportive of your work? Do graduate students help each other succeed? Would anyone like to answer this one? Hao Chen.
Yeah, so I work in Astro division, so I can speak more from the perspective from the Astro division. So overall, I feel like the research environment is very supportive. It's very easy to come to the office and talk to any of my peers about research, and very often we end up in the same class and we help each other with homework, and there's a lot of social activities outside of research as well. So overall, I think people here is the most important reason why I choose to come to the program and I decided to stay. So that also depends on which division you are in, because the environment can be a little bit different in different divisions. But I was president of Physics Graduate Student Council last year. So the overall sense I got is that even from different divisions, people are very supportive overall.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Hao Chen. Sophia.
Yeah, so I really feel like in grad school, at least at MIT, you are not competing against like any other person, because like this is just your path and you don't need to compete with anyone else. And I think that is very, very cool. And like, especially being a first year grad student where you have to take classes and everything, people actually support you a lot, and people do work a lot together, doing PSATs, homework, study for the exams together. We really want our peers to succeed in this path, and we really want to see everyone do good. So it's not that people are gonna like, I don't know, do something bad to you or whatever. People here are very supportive, and that is also one of the reasons I chose MIT too.
Yeah, definitely. And Zichuan.
Yeah, just trying to provide a different perspective from a different department. I'm in the Center for Theoretical Physics. I would say that the environment here is also like overall very supportive among graduate students. I also got a lot of like at least emotional support from like people who are in the same cohort as me. So like these are the people that you will be taking classes with as you're entering. And you kind of like get to know each other, even though you're in different research divisions, through like classwork, and people always like work on homework tests together, like in the graduate student lunch and in common areas. Another thing like is also older graduate students in at least the CTP are very generous with their time to help like the younger graduate students and like provide necessary guidance if you want to talk to anyone, and if you have like questions about the like say course requirement or oral exam requirements, like people are always like willing to talk to you and like help you as you need in your grad school career. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe my 2 cents is I think that there are some horror stories of some departments where like professors will give multiple of their students the same project and like whoever gets there first gets to publish. I have not heard of anything like that happening at MIT. Certainly, I think maybe back in the day I heard about, in like biology departments or something that would happen occasionally. But yeah, I've certainly never heard of that happening here. So I don't think that's something that you need to worry about. Yeah. Cool. So the next question, we've sort of answered in the FAQ. Every application is being read and there are no cutoffs. I think that's pretty straightforward. So we can move on then. How important are teaching experiences? Is one upcoming experience enough? Do you need teaching experience to undergrads only? So I guess this question is about, is it important to have done teaching in undergrad for your application? And I think the answer is generally no, that's not super important, and many people don't. But does anyone else want to weigh in? Yeah, if not, that's fine. Zishran, sure.
I only have personal experience to share, but like I did not do any teaching in undergrad, and I also don't think that it's like an opportunity that's possible for everyone. Like depends on your like undergrad institution. Like you might not like get teaching experience, like no matter like whether you try or not. And I've definitely not heard of like professors or people on the mission committee like mentioning that they are looking for teaching experiences in graduate student applicants. Like this is, I don't think, necessary at all.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This question is about how many students does the Astro department take each year? Obviously, this is not sort of a fixed number per year. It fluctuates a little bit, but does anyone in Astro have anything to say about this? Megan?
Yeah, I guess so I'm a 4th year in Astro. So I think over the past couple of years, we've had on the order of like 5 to 10 students in the Astro division per year. Obviously, more than that get admitted, and then a subset decide to come. But yeah, that's just a rough number. But this is just, I want to emphasize that we're not an Astro department. We are a division, part of physics. And so the applications all go through physics and then get sent out to the different divisions to be read.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sydney, you want to add to that?
Oh, I just wanted to add that our Astro students are incredibly visible on this panel, and they tend to step forward and be very generous with their time in talking to prospective students. But this is not representative necessarily of the numbers of Astro students in the department. We just love our Astro students as we love everybody.
Yeah, yes, I guess that is important. Looking at the name tags on everyone on this call, you would believe that the department is half Astro, which is not true. Yeah, so that's a good point. Cool. So the next question, can the potential supervisor influence the admissions process if they are interested in working with you? I think that the answer to this, okay, maybe I'll give the answer that I've sort of learned from the work that I've done on admissions stuff and hearing about this, which is that, yes, like sort of at the end of the day, everyone needs a place to land in order to be admitted here. The department needs to know that they will be able to find a research group that they can work with during their time here. And so a lot of times that will take the form of a potential supervisor saying that either, yes, I want to use, one of the fellowships that our area has on this student, or I have research funds that I will use to support this student as an RA for their time here. And maybe I'll also take this opportunity to say of the funding that you are guaranteed to be funded for like your whole time here. It's not like, just a couple of years and then you're kind of on your own. The department makes sure that we can fund all the students for their whole PhDs. yeah, does anyone else have something to add on this question? Sydney?
Just to underline what you actually said, because I think it's incredibly important, and that is that it comes into importance when it comes to how we will be funding the students whom we want to admit. Admissions are made by the whole faculty, but the decision about what somebody's individual funding path may be is very, very important to us, and that's where that discussion might come in.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Okay, so the next question, what apart from a publication is considered as demonstrating research abilities? And maybe I'll chime in first, and of course others are welcome to weigh in, that presenting at conferences is also certainly an excellent way to demonstrate that. So if you've gone to a conference and presented a poster or something like that, as well as what you write about in your personal statement and what your letter writers say. Does anyone else want to weigh in? I think we've already sort of heard from some people who didn't have publications at the time of their application. Yeah, Zitrin?
Yeah, so what I heard is also, say you have been working on a project, but for a really long time, but it just hasn't get published yet. Maybe it's like on the process of being published, or you worked on it and then it didn't work out, so it's not going to be published. What's important in these kind of scenarios is you really describe what you have done for the project. Even if the result is not publishable, you just describe the process and your own contribution to trying to work out the problem in general, in your research statement. And that is definitely going to be very useful in terms of providing a perspective for people who's reading your application, and what kind of researcher you're going to be when you become a graduate student here. That's what people actually want to know. A list of publications does not really necessarily mean that you are good at doing research. People actually want to know how you're working through problems, and I think the research statement is a appropriate and powerful place to show that.
Yeah, definitely. Some great points. All right, moving on. How does physics outreach help us, i.e. being president of Society of Physics to Students or doing STEM outreach? And I think this is a great place. We haven't talked much about the optional personal statement yet, but this sort of stuff certainly could go in your statement of purpose. But I think the one thing that I think maybe Sydney and some of the other people say a lot is that the personal statement is basically where you can put anything that you think is important but doesn't fit naturally somewhere else in the application. And so I think that that could be a great place to put to talk about these sorts of things. Yeah, does anyone else want to weigh in? Yeah, Kaylin.
So I would say that physics outreach helps you in that if it's a part of your story and why you want to do physics and how that got you to where you want to be and doing the why you're interested in the research that you want to do. So I talked a lot about that in my personal statement, because as it asks in the optional personal statement, they ask you to share aspects of your background that you feel exhibit your ability to contribute positively to the physics community. And one way to think about that is because a physicist is not just a researcher. They're a communicator, they're a teacher, they're a mentor, a mediator for all different sorts of things. And whatever you have done besides just physics that can demonstrate, that shows how you engage with the physics community more broadly, if you have, and if that explains and contributes to why you want to do what you want to do in graduate school, then I think it's helpful and useful to describe and talk about what it has done for you in your path to where you want to go, so that you can show to the department and admissions committee what it is that the different ways that you have tried to improve and contribute to physics beyond just the physics itself.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. Sophia.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in my personal experience, in my SOP, I basically focused on my research experience, but then in my personal statement, I focused like on other things like outreach, and especially if you come from a historically underrepresented minority or something like that, it is a great place to like emphasize on these things, and also like how coming from this very particular background that is your own and that you only yourself will contribute to build like a better and stronger physics community. So I think that that is a very important point of the personal statement. No, yeah, well, yeah, the optional personal statement.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's see. How much emphasis would winning national selections at a big international physics competition have in our application, and how best to state this? Let's see. I don't know. Anyone want to weigh in on this? I don't know. I certainly did not win any big international physics competitions in undergrad, and I think that's probably true of most people. I don't know. I would maybe consider it in similar to like winning a scholarship or something in your undergrad, and there's like places for that in the application. But I think in general, talking about your research experience is probably going to be more important. And then this would probably go in the like honors and awards section of your application would be sort of what I would suggest. Anyone else have anything, or are we good with that? Sure, Sydney.
Just a quick reminder that all applications are considered holistically, and if you have anything special or unusual that you want to flag, make sure to include it. Don't be shy. Everything is weighed against everything else within your application, and we're always happy to see something special you've done.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right. This question is about if you have a low GPA but good research experience, or the opposite, would you still be considered we've already had sort of some similar questions to this, so maybe we just restate that, as we've said many times, the applications are considered holistically and we don't have any cutoffs. Certainly having a low GPA can make it more challenging to be admitted, but if you have really good research experience, and maybe if you in the personal statement, for example, you could explain if there are any circumstances that contributed to why you have a lower GPA, if there are any issues that contributed to that, I think that could certainly help. Cool. Maybe we just move on. What are the essential things that you recommend to highlight in the statement of purpose and personal statement? We've also talked about this a fair amount at this point. If anyone wants to weigh in, I'll maybe take one person, but otherwise we can also just move on. Okay. In the courses section, do we put in top 10 courses which are most important to the PhD area, or top 10 with the best grades, which is preferred? Let's see. Sydney, do you have an answer to this? I think my initial response would be that there's probably some information about this on the on the application assistance page. We have some pretty detailed information about helping out with the application. And just make sure you read that carefully. Sydney?
I guess I'll give an extreme example. If you got an A+ in modern dance, that's not going to be very relevant in this section. So I guess I would look at the physics classes, specifically physics, math, and other associated classes that are most important to the PhD area. We'll see your grades. But also definitely look at the recommendations we have all over our website and in the application itself. I don't think you were suggesting that anybody writing this was suggesting they would include their modern dance grades.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right. This next question is about whether the admissions committee considers the fact that someone applied and was not admitted last year, and asks whether they should address this. Does anyone have thoughts on this one? Sydney?
People have definitely been admitted the second time they apply, who were not admitted the first time they applied. So that's the first thing I'll say about that. I would encourage you very strongly to address in your application what it is that has changed in that intervening year, especially if you've added experience or done some additional work. People will look for what might be different in an application, but it might just be that the admissions context is different year to year as well. So you can certainly apply a second time. It's one of the questions in the application, whether you've applied before.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Do you have any advice for people interested in more than one field? Are most admitted students certain of their choice of field? I think I will take this to mean within physics, so sort of divisions within physics. Yeah, does anyone have thoughts on, potentially changing? Yeah, it's Sichuan.
I would say like a large number of people coming with a pretty good idea of what field they want to be in. And I believe that this is also one of the questions you have to answer on the application, like your preferred research fields. But it's definitely like you hear all the time. By all the time, I don't mean like half of the people, but like say 20% of the people who have changed fields throughout their graduate career. Yeah, so like if you're like truly interested in a different field of research, like after you got here and you are doing great work and you have like someone to work with, I don't think there's too big of a problem trying to switch fields. You might have to deal with some logistics of like changing your funding source or whatever, but I don't think people are going to be like, no, you cannot do that. Like if you make a good case for yourself, it's possible for sure.
Yeah. Also maybe add that one nice thing that MIT has is guaranteed transitional funding. So if you find that you need to change your advisor, then you're sort of guaranteed a semester of TA funding in order to be able to do that and switch advisors and get that all sorted out and get funding through your new advisor. So it's definitely something that there's some support for if that happens. Yeah. All right. What is a general directive for deciding whether a course is to be added as a foundational physics course or advanced physics course? Okay, this I guess is one of these sort of very specific application questions. Again, I would encourage you to just to look at our website and see if we have any more information on this. I would guess a relativistic quantum mechanics course would go under advanced. And your foundational would be your sort of standard classical mechanics, E&M, quantum, stat mech kind of core courses. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts, or we can move on. Is there a standard format for the statement of purpose that is preferred? Can headers and columns be used to guide readers? Anyone have thoughts on this?
So I'll say I used bolding. I didn't do headers specifically, but I would often like bold key sentences or things that were important, because often your statement of purpose is single spaced, and that can often be kind of a block of text if you don't divide it up in some ways. I wouldn't say there is an official standard format. I think headers are fine. I know people who I've like read other people's applications who, you know, started a section of like past experience and then future interests. You can definitely kind of guide your readers, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like give them landmarks along the way to know, can kind of help them through your statement. Wouldn't say that's required either, but I think that it's definitely doable.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe a kind of a bigger picture point is just again to think about your audience and also how much time they have to read your statement. When the readers are reading 1700 applications, they only have a couple of minutes to read each statement. So just make sure that the important information is easy to find and you're not making your readers sort of hunt for the crucial points in your application. All right, move on to the next question. This is a question about who to contact about waiving the requirement for the English language exams. Sydney, I'm thinking that this is something that maybe you can help with.
I love this question because I get it a lot. And basically, students, and this is a great example, who are from a country where classes are taught in English are sort of self-waiving the IELTS and TOEFL requirement. So if you fit that description of students who would not be expected to provide the IELTS and TOEFL, and you'll find a link to a one-pager on this. If you want it, you can send an email to me at physics-grad. This is all in the FAQ. It's buried in the FAQ, I'll confess. But if you meet one of those descriptions of having conducted your education in English, you do not have to provide an IELTS, TOEFL, and you do not need a formal waiver from us to do that. It'll show up on your application.
Awesome, thank you. Cool. I have a project which went on for over a year with a lot of breaks. How do I fill in the dates in the research section? I mean, I think I would just put when you started and when it ended and maybe not worry too much about putting in each individual break. If anyone else disagrees, but otherwise I think that that's probably fine. Oh, sure, Sydney.
I only want to add that sometimes people are worried they're going to be penalized if they've answered a question interpreting it in the wrong way. We're not looking to penalize you for the way in which you interpret a question. Just give it your best shot. Do your best, okay? That's all we can ask.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent general point to make. All right, are filed patents valued as much, say, in comparison to publication? Let's see, maybe I'll answer this because I think, have a patent on my application, or like a provisional patent or something. I certainly put it on my application and, you know, listed it in the appropriate sections of the website. I don't know if I can say relative to papers how much it's weighted, but I would certainly include it. Anyone else? Okay. What are some examples for the other experiences section? Any thoughts on this? I think it's been too long since I applied to remember what I put, if anything, there. No? Okay. I maybe will defer again to say check out if we have anything on the website. Sydney?
Just use the whole application as creatively as you like. Again, we're not going to penalize you for putting something here that should, you know, that somebody else doesn't think should be here. We're trying to provide you with as many opportunities as possible to, wave your flag proudly, tell us every wonderful thing you've done that you think might be relevant to readers of your application. And if you haven't found another place to put things, definitely use this.
Okay, yeah, awesome. All right, this next one, this is about GPAs, doesn't follow the GPA system listed in the country-specific GPA system. I believe there are instructions on here that probably involve sending an email to someone, or specifying it somewhere. Sydney, can you? There's very detailed instructions on this, I know.
Yeah, there should be a section that describes very specifically where you can put what your grading system was in your school. I'm going to defer to Sophia.
Yeah, I actually remember this from last year when I was applying, and like there's a section that specifies what to do, and it actually has like some nice links and everything, and there are some pages in the internet that you can find, like even for some countries and for some specific institutions, you can find how they convert to the US GPA.
Yeah, and there's probably a text box where you can describe it if it doesn't fit in any of those things that you can find. So yeah, take a look at the application, and and maybe this is a good point to reiterate that if you have any like very specific questions that you don't feel are answered during the webinar, there's a couple of routes you can take. There's physics-grad@mit.edu, and we can help with, individual specific questions. And then if you feel like you need broader overall assistance with your application, there's the mentorship program that will where the applications for that will go live on our website later today. So check back later today or tomorrow if you feel like you have not been able to get the help you need in other ways. All right, this one is about master's degrees, and the answer to this is that we do not offer master's degrees except in very extremely limited circumstances. Yes, our department pretty much, unless you know that there is a reason that you should get a master's degree, which I think is mainly just for the Air Force or something like that, you will not be getting a master's degree from the MIT Department of Physics. So yes, hopefully that answers that. How old are most people who get admitted? Is there a cutoff? I don't think there's a cutoff. Does anyone have any thoughts? I think if you sort of meet the requirements, the other stated requirements, you're welcome to apply. I think there's certainly, I'm sure there have been young people who have been admitted to the physics department at some point. So yeah. All right, next question. Does a math minor help for theoretical physics admissions? Yeah, which one?
I would say, I mean, it definitely depends on your institution and what the math minor constitutes, like in terms of courses and how it prepares you for a physics degree. But that should be pretty clear, like just from like looking at other parts of your application already. Like if you can demonstrate that you can use like tools that's relevant for theoretical physics, then where you got these tools from, like whether from a math minor or just like from your own interest in reading, it doesn't like really make a difference to in terms of like applications and how you will succeed later on. I mean, I feel like most people that I know in the CTP did do like either a math minor or a math double major in their undergrad. So, I mean, like if you're doing it already, I feel like it just shows that you're the kind of person who's interested in this kind of topics. So yeah, it's not necessarily like a causal relationship, but it's definitely correlated.
Yeah, excellent. And just to state it again, we have sort of holistic admissions processes. So even if you don't have the thing on your CV that says you got a minor in math, like you didn't get that piece of paper or whatever, we'll see that you took those courses, like Citron was saying. Cool. This person is wondering if there's anything that we can suggest for their recommenders to emphasize on. Maybe I'll weigh in on sort of what I did, and other people, of course, are welcome to as well. Which is just that you want to make sure that your recommendation letters are kind of complementing your application. So I think it's certainly advisable to prepare some some documents, some points that you want your recommenders to emphasize on, either to support something, some of the important points in your application, especially your research experience and what you were contributing to research projects, but also if there's anything else that you feel like maybe there's not a great way for that to get addressed in your application, or that your recommender could speak to better than you, then yeah, I guess that's a vague answer, but maybe my answer is mainly just certainly feel free to suggest things to your recommenders. I don't know if anyone has any specifics that they did, but yeah, Citron.
I feel like a general advice for like what recommenders or recommendation letters should include is just you really want the recommenders to know you well as a person, like not just research, but like you as a person. And that might influence like how you choose your 3 recommenders, 3 or 4 recommenders as well. Like maybe someone like knows you really well in terms of research, and someone knows you really well in terms of like other works that you have done in terms of contributing to a diverse community or whatever. But like that's where like communication with your recommender really comes in. Like you want to talk to them as much as possible to get to let them like know you as a person, and how like what your goals are in grad school, and how you have done things to achieve this goal, and why you want to say get to MIT. And the better they know like you and your goals and your reasons, the better the letter will be.
Yeah, definitely. All right. All right, so the next question is about applied physics versus physics PhD program. And I think the answer to this, as it pertains to MIT, is we do not have an applied physics program. There's just the physics program. And we've already talked a little bit about how people from various undergrad degrees are still welcome to apply to the physics program. Yeah, I guess I know other schools have different programs, and as you apply to other schools, you should definitely take that into account and figure out what is best. But at MIT, it's all just physics. All right, this student is asking about the typical weekday and weekend for theoretical physics PhD students. What else do grad students do apart from physics? And let's start with there, and then we can talk about interdisciplinary in a second, maybe. Yeah, Zitran.
Interesting question. Well, I would say that this varies a lot depending on what kind of person you are, not like in what division you're in. I have like people around me, like people in the CTP, range from like having perfect work-life balance, like doing work like 9 to 5, and then like go home and do all kinds of things on the weekend, having hobbies, to like people who's like literally at the office at all kinds of odd hours that you can think about, like 5 p.m. on a Sunday, whatever. I don't know, like I feel like the CTP is a very inclusive place in terms like you definitely are encouraged to choose your own like hours of working that you feel comfortable with. Like no one's gonna like side eye you if you come in at 5 p.m. on a Sunday if you want to do work at the office. That's fine. And I feel like in general, the environment and atmosphere is very inclusive and welcoming, in the sense that people like are very friendly, and we even have like on Slack have a channel with like cooking and photography, like people post their food and whatever. So yeah, like it's just it's a place where you can do whatever you feel like, basically. So there's no typical weekday and weekends for the general like group of graduate students in the CTP.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's kind of true in other divisions as well. And it definitely depends on sort of, yourself and to some extent your advisor. And maybe this is a conversation that, you should have with your advisor during like the open house, or, at some point after admitted and when you're deciding on a particular advisor. All right. And then I guess the last part of this question is about how interdisciplinary research is. And I think that also kind of varies a lot, and to some extent is up to you if you want to reach out to other people and work with them. I certainly know people who are doing fairly interdisciplinary projects within physics. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that? Sure.
I mean, I guess in terms of the CTP specifically, we are like physically linked to the CMT division, like the condensed matter theory department. Like you literally just walk across the hall and there's like all the faculty and students in condensed matter theory. So it's really easy to like have a conversation, say, with people over there. And then it like is also not too far to walk to the experimental particle like physics area. People who like work in the lab and like actually do the experiments. So I would say like, yeah, it definitely depends on your advisor, but I would say the general environment is people here encourage like working with people from different areas, and we want you to like broaden your horizon if that's what interests you.
Sydney?
And I'll add to that there are many areas of research at MIT that are collaborative in nature and have students and faculty collaborating together from many different departments, labs, and departments and programs around MIT, and they may be following different degree requirements and getting a different degree at the end of their studies, but they're collaborating and working together.
Yeah. And maybe I'll add that I am sort of, I guess I'm a weird case of this, but I'm kind of co-advised by two people, and that can also be a possibility. Sometimes if you're, you need a primary advisor within physics, but if that's something that you can arrange and get everyone to agree to, then that's certainly possible as well. Zichuan?
Yeah, I have just one more point. Like there are faculties in the CTP specifically who are like interdisciplinary themselves. Like we have a faculty who also are in the history department, David Kaiser. Like, so yeah, like there's like tons of possibilities. Like and we also have like postdocs who works on like the history of dark matter. And they're considered like, part of the physics department, but also part of the history department. So it's very broad, like, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. All right. The next question, I think I believe the answer to this is that there is not anywhere to upload a CV in the application. Is that correct, Sydney? Yes. Okay. Yes, there's not a place to upload a CV, so the length doesn't really matter. You put all the different pieces in the different parts of the application, and some of those may have their own length limits, but hopefully it should be fairly self-explanatory. Cool. Can we select faculty we're interested in from the dropdown in application, even if we haven't contacted the faculty beforehand? We've sort of answered this one already in the fact that we've said that you do not need to reach out to faculty ahead of time. So yes, certainly select whichever faculty you are interested in working with in the application. Sydney?
Oh, just to add that the selection also helps us guide your application through the process and helps us to have a better sense of what your research interest might be and who might be interested in seeing your application. Again, there are some areas of research that sort of straddle between a few of our other subfields, and this is helpful. You know, the LIGO folk run into this a bunch as an example. So this helps us better understand what your research interests might be.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay. Let's see. At MIT, are graduate students admitted to a specific group, and are students obliged to work with professors they have mentioned in their application? We've touched on this some already. It's kind of a yes and no, I guess. People certainly change advisors after they are admitted. And so it is not a hard and fast rule that you must work with the people that you mentioned in your application. I'm not actually sure that I mentioned my current advisor in my application. So yes, I think that is certainly possible. Anyone else have a thought on this one? Yeah, Sophia.
Yeah, I would say that during the first year, many grad students are admitted under a fellowship, at least a first year fellowship. And then the idea of this fellowship is for you to explore various areas of research within your own division, or maybe even like in another division, and then you can get your transitional TA funding. There are like a lot of ways you can actually explore other things, and you're not like forced to work with someone you don't want to if you don't like that person after your first year.
Yeah, definitely. Sichuan.
I think this varies a bit by division for sure. Like in the CTP, like all the grad students are covered by like a canopy fund. So like you're free to like work with whatever faculty is in the CTP, and like the way you're funded is like sort of sorted through by all the faculties in the CTP together. I think like at least that's my understanding. But I hear that in the particle experiment department, NUPACs, they are like their funding is slightly like more tied to the experiment and the project itself. So if you like basically signed up to do a specific experiment, it might be a little bit harder to switch to a completely different research group, because they might not have like funding for you at a different like experiment, because like money is tied to the experiment in that way. But I'm sure there's like ways to work around this. And again, like we have transitional funding if like funding is an issue.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the department is pretty good at trying to work with people to make this, you know, to make sure everyone is has an advisor that is a good fit for them. I guess I'll also mention one thing that we haven't mentioned thus far is that there's like the first year sort of seminar series that first year students attend. That is kind of the whole point of it is that different professors from different areas give talks about their research in the hope of sort of, you know, introducing people to what research is going on and helping them find an advisor. All right. I have some gaps in my education and career due to personal reasons. How would it affect my application if I can't justify it properly? Anyone have thoughts on this? Sydney?
Just a reminder that while you are not required to share any personal information with us, the optional personal statement is designed specifically as a place where you can talk about anything that gives context to the rest of your application materials. And if you feel that there should be some further context provided, please do use the optional statement.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it may even be, you know, in some cases, if you don't want to divulge details, you could just say that, you know, you could, in your personal statement, you could just mention that due to personal reasons, there were gaps in my application. And, you know, we're certainly not requiring you to, yeah, give details, any details that you don't want to.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Why did you choose MIT? I guess we can, maybe this one we should just go around and everyone gives a sentence or two if we're okay with that. I'm happy to start, and for me, it definitely came down to advisors who I felt were a good fit for me and who were doing the research that I was interested in. And a lot of some of the other schools that I was admitted to, they would maybe have like, one professor who was both sort of seemed like maybe a good fit and sort of personality wise, and was doing research that I was interested in. And MIT had a couple, and so I felt a little bit sort of safer that if my first advisor didn't work out, I would have somewhere else to go. And that was an important consideration for me. Yeah, anyone else?
Yeah, I guess that for me, it was basically research fit. I really wanted to work with this particular professor. And then when I met him during the open house, I realized that I really wanted to come here and that I really wanted to be in this group. I also realized that people here, like the culture here at MIT in physics is great. And that is also something that is very important for me. And then more of a personal reason, I have family nearby, and being an international student, that was something very important for me too.
Awesome. Yeah.
For me, it was, I guess, a combination of things. First, I personally, I really like to be in a city, and MIT is one of the few places in the States that you can actually be in a city. One of the reasons that I came here. But also, even though like my open house was online, faculties that I've talked to like over Zoom were like all really friendly and welcoming, and I just really liked the environment. So that's like another really big factor of why I decided to come here.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, should I mention specific professors' names in my statement of purpose, or how can I mention a group at MIT, for example, the relativistic heavy ion group? Yeah, so for this one, I don't know, any thoughts? I think I would probably recommend listing some specific professors, but I am not, I don't know exactly how something like the relativistic heavy ion group works. Yeah.
So at least like advisors, well, what I did when I was applying was I listed like I think 2 or 3 faculties in the CTP who I consider working with, and I described like briefly like what kind of work generally I could imagine myself doing with them. And I think a general advice that you would get from like faculty and like admission committee members or people who knows are like mention like 2 to 3 like specific faculty and kind of describe like what kind of work you imagine yourself doing with them. And that really shows that you are a good fit with in terms of research here, and you did the work to like get to know what people do here, and you can really imagine yourself being here, and that's important to show in the application.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right. Okay, so I'm an international student and the expense of the TOEFL was quite large. All right, wondering if we offer fee waivers for that. Sydney? Is this, are there fee waivers for the TOEFL?
I don't think this is a fee waiver. I think the person may be asking if we can, there are 2 questions here. Do we waive the TOEFL in cases where an international student can't afford to take it? And there's a second question, can we pay for them to take the TOEFL? I think that's what we have here. We have no way to pay for you to take the TOEFL, and all applicants are expected to represent their knowledge of English. So if a test is the only way for you to demonstrate that, your application will seem a little weaker compared to an application by someone who can provide a TOEFL score. Maybe you could send me a separate email to physics-grad about your specific situation, and I can answer more fully.
Yeah. That sounds good. Thanks, Sydney. And maybe we'll do one more question and then wrap up. Let's see. I was told that students work on 2 different projects that are as different as possible their first year. In my SOP, should I indicate 2 different subfields? I don't think this is a general thing that happens in the department. I think most students will just start working on, with whatever advisor they've identified that they want to work with during the open house, or they'll work on finding an advisor during their first year. We don't do rotations, if that's sort of part of the question. I know some other departments do that. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one? Okay. Well, with that, we are going to wrap up the webinar. So I'd like to thank all of the panelists and definitely Sydney for helping out with this. And thanks to everyone who attended. Hopefully it was useful. A couple of reminders. We have the physics-grad@mit.edu email address if you have any one-off questions that we did not answer. Definitely also check out like the FAQ in our website for all the information that's on there. There's also recordings of several past webinars on the website with transcripts that should be able to be, Control F searched, so that should be helpful too. This webinar, the recording of it will go up sometime soon. I don't have a specific date on that, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We just have to get a transcript for it, and then we will post it on the website as well. And later today, if you still feel that you need that you're not able to get your questions answered through any of these means, the one-on-one mentorship program that we offer, the application for that will go online this afternoon. So maybe check back tomorrow for that on our website if that's something that you're interested in. Yeah, with that, I will stop the recording.